Nathan Cole stopped his car near an old diner at the side of a quiet Oregon road. The morning was pale and cool. A few trucks were parked outside, and a dog slept near the steps. He had not planned to stop, but something about the diner made him turn off the highway. He told himself he just wanted coffee, but deep down he felt strange, as if a small part of the past was stirring awake. Inside, the air smelled of fresh bread and roasted beans. Country music played in the background. A few locals sat near the window talking softly about rain and fishing. Nathan always liked quiet places like this, places that did not know who he was. In most places, people looked at him with attention or fear because he was a billionaire, owner of a famous company that built smart homes and devices. Here, he was just another traveler in a gray coat. He sat near the counter. The table was polished from years of use. A waitress came toward him holding a notepad and smiling kindly. Her name tag said Lily. She was in her late 20s. With brown hair tied loosely and bright eyes that seemed to hold both joy and sadness, she looked at Nathan with polite interest. He ordered black coffee and toast. She nodded and turned toward the kitchen. Her steps were light and quick. He found himself watching her longer than he meant to. Nathan glanced out the window. The road stretched into fog. It reminded him of mornings from his childhood in the countryside before everything changed. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant, but he put it away. For once, he wanted to sit still without noise. When Lily returned with his order, she poured coffee carefully. Her eyes noticed something on his wrist as he reached for the cup. For a moment she froze. Her hand trembled slightly. Her eyes stayed on the tattoo that lay faint and thin against his skin. A small symbol shaped like a half-circle with vines twisting across it. She took a sudden breath. Her voice came out quiet and uncertain. She said, "My long-lost brother had the same tattoo." Nathan looked up sharply. For a second, he thought he had heard wrong. His heart thudded once, strong and strange. The cup almost slipped from his fingers. He stared at her, at the way her face had gone pale. The sound of plates clattering in the kitchen faded into silence inside his ears. He had not spoken about that tattoo to anyone in many years. When he was 13, he and his twin brother had made it with the help of a teenage friend using cheap ink. They had hidden it from their parents. It was their secret mark, their promise that they would never lose each other, no matter what happened. Then the fire came that took everything from them. His parents died. His brother vanished. The police told him there were no survivors beyond himself. The pain had buried itself deep beneath years of work and wealth. Now, this waitress was looking at him with wide, shocked eyes, repeating words that reopened every wound he thought was gone. Tay asked quietly, "What did you say?" She seemed unsure whether to speak again. Finally she whispered, "My brother had a tattoo just like that. It's the same shape. He told me it meant the vines always find each other." Nathan's hand began to shake. Oh. Those were exactly the words his brother Caleb had spoken when the ink was still wet on their wrists. He stared at Lily, searching her face for something familiar. There was something in the curve of her eyes, something about the quiet strength in her voice. It felt impossible, yet it pulled at the same place in his heart that used to ache for what he had lost. Lily noticed his sudden tension and looked nervous. She said she was sorry if she had spoken out of place. She explained that her brother disappeared when she was a child, almost 20 years ago. Her hand held the edge of the counter as she said it, as if the memory itself hurt. Nathan was silent. His mind raced through questions. The years did not match perfectly, yet the tattoo, the words, the feeling, everything felt too close. The man who never believed in fate suddenly felt its breath on his neck. He took a deep breath and asked where she had lived before. She gave the name of a small town in northern Oregon, the same place his family once lived before the tragedy. Time seemed to fold back on itself. The smell of smoke, the cries, the night of the fire, all flashed again in his memory. He felt a chill, even though the diner was warm. Lily noticed his reaction and quietly poured more coffee, though his cup was still full. Neither spoke for a long minute. Then she said softly that she sometimes thought her brother was still alive, but never had proof. There was sadness, not hope, in her voice. Nathan turned the cup in his hand and said that sometimes the truth hides until the heart is ready. He did not know why he said it, only that it felt right. The diner's door opened, and a small gust of wind swept in. The morning had become brighter, yet everything around them seemed distant. Nathan looked again at the mark on his wrist, then at Lily. Something deep inside him whispered that his life, so carefully built and controlled, was about to change forever. Nathan drove back from the diner with his mind spinning like a storm. The voice of the waitress stayed in his head again and again. Her words about the tattoo, her face when she looked at him, those eyes that seemed half scared and half hopeful. It made his chest heavy in a way he had not felt in years. He had spent most of his adult life buried in business deals, offices, and long flights. But that morning, nothing about work seemed to matter. He reached his home in Portland, a large gray house with wide glass windows. The place was silent like a museum. He sat by the window for a long time, staring at nothing. All he could think of was the night of the fire from his childhood. He had thought that the roof falling and the heat licking the air was the last thing he would ever feel. But someone had pulled him out through the back door. When he awoke in the hospital, they told him that no one else had survived. No parents, no twin brother. He had never questioned it because the police said they had found no other body. Now, all those facts trembled in his mind like weak branches in wind. What if the report had been wrong? What if his brother had lived? The idea both scared and thrilled him. He had millions of reasons to ignore such thoughts, yet something inside refused to let go. The tattoo on Lily's brother had the same words that only 2 boys in the world should have known. It could not be a simple mistake. The next morning, Nathan returned to the same diner. The same music played softly. The same smell of coffee hung in the air. Lily looked surprised when she saw him again. He said he had enjoyed the food and wanted another breakfast, but she could tell that was not the full truth. When she poured his coffee, he asked her gentle questions. He wanted to know more about her brother without making her uncomfortable. She said her brother's name was Caleb. The name hit Nathan like a hammer. It was the same as his lost twin. She said when the fire happened, their aunt had tried to take them away, but she was in another state at the time. After the fire, Lily was found and sent to a hospital. No one could find Caleb, but one social worker told her that maybe he had been taken to a different shelter. Then the files were lost. Years passed, and she grew up thinking he must have died. Nathan listened carefully, his fingers tight around his cup. The story matched too well. His voice shook a little as he asked where she had grown up after the fire. She told him the name of the small town again, the same region he remembered from his early life. Everything connected like pieces of an old puzzle that had been missing for decades. Lily studied him now. She said he looked pale and asked if he was all right. He said yes, but inside he was breaking open. He wanted to tell her who he was. He wanted to say the truth, that he also had a twin named Caleb and the same tattoo. But he feared it would sound insane, or worse, cruel. What if she was wrong? What if this story stirred up her pain for nothing, he told himself, to wait and be sure. He paid the bill and left a generous tip, but he walked out slower this time. Outside, he called his private investigator, the one who handled delicate personal matters. Nathan told him to find every record about a family fire 19 years ago in that part of Oregon, especially about a boy named Caleb. The investigator did not ask questions. He promised to start at once. In the days that followed, Nathan could not focus on his company meetings. His staff noticed he was distracted. He stopped attending business dinners and spent hours alone reading old archives online. At night he dreamed of 2 boys laughing while drawing little vines on each other's wrists, saying the promise again and again. He woke up each time with his heart pounding. A week later, the investigator called. Some parts of the story were confirmed. There had been 2 children registered under that name in foster records. One had disappeared during hospital transfers. There was no death certificate. Nathan felt his throat tighten when he heard it. He went back to the diner one last time, carrying a small envelope with a photo inside, taken when he and his brother were 9. Lily was busy serving a table, but when she saw him, she smiled nervously. He sat at the end booth and waited until her shift slowed down. As she came over, he asked if she could look at an old picture. She wiped her hands on her apron and took the photo carefully. Her fingers shook. She looked at the faces of the 2 boys holding wooden toy planes beside a barn. She said softly that the boy on the left looked just like her missing brother when they were children. Nathan felt something deep inside him break open, then fold itself back together. Every part of him knew what this meant, even if his mind could not yet speak it aloud. Lily stared at the picture again, tears forming in her eyes, and said that maybe she should start believing that miracles can be small but real. Nathan could not say a word. He just nodded slowly, feeling time move around them like gentle wind, carrying both pain and hope in the same breath. Nathan could not stop thinking about that moment in the diner when Lily looked at the old photo. The image of her eyes widening, her hands trembling as she traced the faces of the boys in the picture, burned itself into his mind. He barely slept that night. The air in his large house felt heavy and thin, all at once. He paced across the floor, pausing now and then to stare at the framed cityscapes on the wall. They reminded him how far he had climbed, and how alone he still was. The next morning, Nathan went to see the investigator in person. The man's office was small and old, the kind that smelled of paper and dust. Files filled every corner. The investigator handed Nathan a folder thick with copies of reports. There were pages from hospitals, foster homes, and child services. Many parts were blacked out, but enough words remained to make sense. It said that a boy named Caleb Hart had been moved from one care center to another after the fire. Somewhere during the transfer, the paperwork mixed with another child's file. Later, a record from a burned building listed Caleb as missing, not dead. Nathan felt his heart pounding harder with each new page he turned. He asked if anyone had ever searched for the missing child. The investigator shook his head. The trail had gone cold 2 decades ago. Nathan thanked him and stepped outside into the sharp autumn air. The street smelled of rain and fallen leaves. He stood for a long time on the corner, staring at the people passing by, all living ordinary lives, completely unaware that his entire world had shifted. Later that week, he met Lily again, after her shift. She had agreed to talk somewhere quiet. They sat in a small park behind the diner, near a bench overlooking a pond. The water was calm and reflected the fading light of the sun. Lily looked nervous, but curious. Nathan spoke slowly and told her what he had learned from the investigator. As he explained, she leaned forward, listening closely. She nodded when he mentioned the hospital fire that destroyed records. She said she had been told almost the same story by her foster mother long ago. The details matched too closely to be chance. Hearing it made her eyes fill with tears. She tried to hide by turning away. She said she had always felt something missing inside her life, as if a thread had been cut too soon. Nathan listened quietly. In that moment, he was not the powerful businessman who controlled companies and signed million-dollar deals. He was simply a man trying to touch a fading piece of his past. He showed her again the tattoo on his wrist. It was faded, but still clear enough to see the vines twisting in half a circle. Lily rolled up her sleeve and revealed a matching mark on her wrist, the mirror image of his. When she placed her arm beside his, the vines connected perfectly into a full circle. They sat in silence for a while, staring at their wrists and the simple design that had tied to lost lives together again. Nathan finally said that when he was a boy, his brother had told him the vines would always find their way back. Hearing her repeat those same words before almost broke him apart. Lily smiled faintly, wiping her tears. She said she'd never understood why her brother wanted that tattoo at such a young age. It was their secret, something small and powerful between them. All she knew, it had been a message of hope from the very beginning. Nathan asked if she had any objects left from her childhood. She nodded and said there was a box of old photos and papers kept at her foster home. The next day they drove together to her foster mother's house in the nearby town. The house was small, painted light blue with flowers lined along the porch. An older woman greeted them warmly and asked Lily about her new friend. Lily simply said he was helping to find her past. Inside, the woman brought down a cardboard box wrapped in twine. Dust rose as she set it on the table. Nathan and Lily sat close, opening it carefully. Inside were faded photographs, a few broken toys, and a small drawing of 2 children standing under a tree. One of them held a wooden plane. Underneath, in tiny handwriting, were the words, "Our home will come back." Lily pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to speak. Nathan felt the same ache twisting in his chest. They looked at each other, and it was as if time had folded back, and the long years apart had never truly broken the invisible line that joined their hearts. Before leaving, Nathan promised Lily he would help her uncover the rest of what happened. She thanked him, saying she did not know why he cared so much, but she felt that somehow he was part of the story too. He smiled gently and said that maybe he was more part of it than either of them yet understood. As he drove away that evening, the sky was filled with fading orange light. He gazed at his wrist on the steering wheel. The half-circle of vines no longer felt like a scar. It felt like a signal reaching home at last. Nathan woke before sunrise the next day. He had not slept much, but felt strangely alive. The sound of rain touched the window, light and steady. For years he had begun each morning with phone calls and schedules, but that day he ignored his work and brewed coffee without hurry. The thoughts of Lily and all that they had uncovered filled his mind. He could not shake the feeling that life was giving him another chance to face what he had long buried. He drove out of the city again, back to the small town where Lily lived. The roads were wet and shiny in the early light. In the diner, she greeted him with a shy smile, as if expecting him. They spoke quietly for a moment before she told the cook she was taking her break. They stepped outside and walked under the awning while the rain came down, soft and silver. She told him she had been looking through more of the old box and found new papers. He followed her home to see them. Her apartment was simple, warm, and filled with books and pictures. The walls showed scenes of mountains and oceans, things she said she wished to visit one day. She laid a small folder on the table. Inside were adoption forms and letters from a missing agency. One of the letters mentioned confusion about two children with the same birth date but different last names. Nathan read it slowly, his hands shaking slightly. Had money, power, and all the tools to find truth. But what he felt now was not about control. It was about something larger, something that connected their lives beyond reason. Lily sat across from him, watching his face. She said when she looked at him she felt a strange calm, as if she had known him much longer than a few weeks. Nathan met her eyes and said he felt the same. He placed the photo of the two boys on the table beside the papers. The air between them grew heavier, charged with both sorrow and strong feeling. Later, they drove to the county building to ask for the rest of the adoption records. A clerk searched for an hour before returning with another folder, stained with age. Inside it was a correction note that explained the mix-up. Caleb Hart had been transferred to a hospital under the wrong identity after the fire. Records after that were unclear. The other child had died, and authorities had assumed it was Caleb. The discovery left both of them quiet. It meant that the boy Nathan had believed lost could have survived, taken under another name. Lily looked at the note for a long time, then turned to Nathan. She said in a whisper that maybe the boy grew up as him. At her words, Nathan felt a deep ache and longing. For years he had dreamed that his brother somehow lived, and now the truth was opening before him. They spent the afternoon walking along the streets without speaking much. The world around them looked brighter and sadder at once. At one point, she said she never thanked him for helping her. He answered softly that finding her was something he needed as much as she did. Her hand brushed his by accident, and neither pulled away. That evening they stopped near the edge of town where the hills turned golden in the late sun. He sat on a bench overlooking the fields. Nathan said he had spent his life chasing success to fill an emptiness he could not name. Now he finally knew it was not success he had been seeking, but connection. Lily smiled faintly and said she always believed every soul carries a string that leads it back to its match. Sometimes the path takes years, but it always finds the other end. For a moment they sat quiet, only the wind moving through the grass. Nathan looked at her and felt something stir that went beyond family, beyond the past. It was as if their hearts had recognized each other across time and pain. He did not know what to call it, only that it felt honest and alive. When they returned to the diner, Lily went inside to clean after closing, and Nathan stayed to help her. They worked side by side, wiping counters and moving chairs. The simple act felt peaceful. She laughed when he tried to use the coffee machine and failed. He laughed too, the sound free and young. For the first time in many years, he did not feel the heavy weight of his old grief. Before leaving, Nathan paused by the door and looked at her again. He said quietly that he wanted to keep searching for more proof, but even if no paper survived, he already knew what was true in his heart. She nodded and said truth often lives deeper than records. That night when he drove back, rain began again, light against his windshield. He looked at the tattoo on his wrist and smiled. The half circle no longer felt lonely. He could almost sense the other half shining somewhere nearby, alive and real. Vines had found their way once more, carrying not only memory but also the promise of something new beginning between them. The morning sunlight spread across the small town, soft and clear, washing away the night rain. Nathan arrived at the diner early. He had a quiet kind of excitement in his chest that he had not felt since childhood. Lily was already inside, arranging fresh flowers on each table. She smiled when she saw him and said she had been waiting. The place looked brighter, painted recently in new colors. She said she had used some of her savings to buy the diner from the previous owner. Nathan looked around and felt proud of her courage. They sat together in the last booth beside the window. Lily told him that she had contacted the adoption office and found a few more papers that might finally confirm what they had both begun to believe. Nathan listened carefully, feeling hope build inside him even though he tried to stay calm. Within the folder were scanned records from years ago showing that Caleb Hart had been misidentified. After the fire and placed in the care of a new family under the name Nathan Cole, when Nathan read that line, his eyes filled with tears. The truth was simple but powerful. He had spent his entire life thinking his brother had died without knowing that the name change had turned him into the same missing child they were searching for. Lily reached across the table and placed her hand on his. There was no need for words. They both understood what it meant. The circle was complete. For a long time they sat in silence, while the diner filled slowly with morning light. Nathan spoke at last and said he had always felt something missing in him, a deep ache that nothing could fix. Meeting her had closed that empty space. Lily smiled through tears and said she felt the same. She said life had stolen something from both of them, but somehow had given it back in a different shape. Later that week, Nathan closed his offices for a few days and came back to help Lily repair the old diner's roof. They worked together under the open sky. He found comfort in the simple tasks, painting and hammering beside her. In her company, he laughed without effort. She teased him about being a billionaire learning to fix shingles, and he told her he had never enjoyed a day in his company boardroom as much as that afternoon on the roof. The laughter carried into the air, easy and clean. When the repairs were done, Lily decided to rename the diner The Vines, after the tattoo that had led them together. The sign hung above the door in green and white letters. People in the town liked the name. Nathan visited almost every week. Sometimes he brought documents about local projects to support small businesses. Sometimes he brought nothing but himself. Each time the place felt more like home. One evening, long after the last customer left, they sat together outside the diner. The sky was turning purple and gold. Lily looked at him with a quiet expression and asked what he would do now that he had found the truth. Nathan said he wanted to live differently. He had money and power, but realized that none of it compared to human connection. He planned to start a foundation to help children who grew up lost like they did, children who needed a second chance at family. Lily said that was a beautiful idea and promised to help him however she could. The conversation fell into peaceful silence. For a moment, Nathan reached for her hand again, and she did not pull away. It was the same warmth he had felt the first day they met, but now it held a calm certainty. Their bond felt like something more than shared memory, as if they had known each other across lives and had been waiting to meet here again. Over the next months, the diner grew popular with travelers who stopped for coffee and stayed for stories. Many of them felt strangely at peace inside the small place without knowing why. Nathan often sat by the window, helping Lily write menus or simply listening to her laugh. Every now and then, someone would notice their matching tattoos and ask about them. Nathan would smile and say they were a reminder that the Vines always find each other in time. Lily organized a small gathering at the diner to thank the locals who had supported them. There was music and warm food, and the sound of people talking in happy voices. Nathan stood beside her, watching the lights reflect on the window glass. Realized he was no longer looking for anything. The ache of loss was gone, replaced by quiet peace. As the crowd left and the night settled into soft stillness, Lily turned the sign to closed. She looked at Nathan and said everything had started with one word she spoke without thinking. He nodded and said, "Sometimes one sentence can change an entire life." They both laughed softly. The vines on their wrists gleamed faintly under the yellow lights, complete and whole. The wind stirred outside, carrying the scent of rain. The town slept, and the diner glowed like a small heart of warmth in the dark. Nathan felt certain that fate had guided them with gentle hands all along. What began as shock and grief had become a path toward peace and love. He looked around at the place, at her, and thought that maybe life had always been waiting for this exact moment to bring everything home.